Hello, YouTubers, Jicky Dave. I'm back from my holiday, and now I'm going to do my ranking on the Tom Baker era of the show, which of course is my favorite era, along with a lot of fans. And it is considered one of the most recognizable eras of the show, as Tom Baker is probably one of the most, who is like the most recognizable Doctor in the whole show, along with William Hartnell, Jon Pertwee, David Tennant, Matt Smith, and Peter Capaldi. So let's begin with his debut story, Robot. Robot, a great story, great start to the Tom Baker story. People say it's underrated. I don't think it's underrated. I think it's really highly praised. I really enjoy it. It's such a fun story. After giving it so many rewatches, I love the K1 robot. The design for the K1 robot's just fantastic. The Ark in Space, fantastic story. This would begin Philip Hinchcliffe's start for producer. Fantastic story. Really enjoyed it. The design for that worming's really brilliant. Probably one of the best stories out of season 12 and one of my favorite stories. Sultan Experiment. Fun two-parter. In my opinion, people say that this is another underrated story, but I think this story is really highly praised. I think it's another great story. Genesis of the Daleks, the best story out of season 12 in my opinion. One of my favorite Tom Baker stories of all time. And it says it's the 9-1 best Doctor Who story of all time. Well, I disagree. I think the best 9-1 Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who story of all time, in my opinion, is probably either Road to Death, The Case of Androzani, or To the Silence. So yeah, but still a fantastic story. Such a great introduction to Davros, the creator of the Daleks, and a great introduction to the origins of the Daleks themselves. Revenge of the Cybermen. Yes, this is actually a great story. Yeah, it does have its flaws. The one thing that really puts it down is the Cybermen in the story sounding way too human. But that was all due to budget cuts, as they were saving up for stories like The Ark in Space, Sultan Experiment, and Just the Daleks from this season. In my opinion, this is probably like the most underrated story from this season. People say it's Robot or Sultan Experiment, but in my opinion, The Revenge of the Cybermen is the most underrated story from this season, because it's often overshadowed by like The Ark in Space, Sultan Experiment, and Just the Daleks from season 12. But overall, I like the story. It's enjoyable. Season 12 is a strong season. I see it as Tom Baker's third best season. Now we head into season 13. Tom Baker's second season. We got Terror of the Zygons. Great start to season 13. Fantastic story. The soundtrack in this story is so amazing. The Zygon design is really brilliant. So yeah, fantastic start to season 13. Planet of Evil. Great story. Really underrated. I really enjoyed this story. I love how Tom Baker's costume is like a mix between his season 12 and 13 and 14A costumes. So yeah, I love this story. Great story, really underrated. Pyramids of Mars, fantastic story. Another one of my favorite Tom Baker stories of all time. Sutekh is such a fantastic villain story, and it does so well for pacing for a four-parter. Really enjoyable story. If you want to get into the classic series, this is one of the stories you should watch first. The Android Invasion. Great story. I think is a great story. I love the design of the and stuff, and I love the location, but I think it's probably like the weakest out of season 13. That's just my opinion. Brain and Morbius, fantastic story. I love this. Morbius, the design for Morbius is just so brilliant. I love it. It's got such a Frankenstein feeling to it. The Seeds of Doom, great six-parter final. It does so well for a six-parter. So yeah, really great action-packed story. It's probably another. It does so well for a post-Jon Pertwee story, in my opinion. It's sort of like the Jon Pertwee era, like sort of faded away at this point. So yeah, great story. Overall, season 13 is another strong season. I see it as Tom Baker's second best season. A lot of fans see it as his best season, but I think the best season for Tom Baker's run is the one after it. which we start with Tom Baker's first season, season 14. So we got Musk and Draga, fantastic story, such a fantastic start to season 14. I love how it's set in Italy. So yeah, fantastic story, fantastic start to season 14. Really underrated story. Hand of Fear, another fantastic story. It's got another sort of graphic horror theme story to it. How Eldred's hand moves on its own and how people get possessed by this ring. Fantastic story, and a great closure to Sarah Lane Smith, who does come back for the Fight Dogs and then comes back for the new series during the David Tennant era. Deadly Assassin, probably another one of my favorite Tom Baker stories of all time. It's probably like one of the most darkest stories from this season. The Masters, this Pete Brad's incarnation of the Master is so terrifying, and the ending scene for it just really gave me nightmares. I love it. Such a really dark, horror-like themed story. Fantastic story. One of my favorites. Face of Evil, another great story. Although I give it like an 8.5 out of 10, it's still a great story, but I think it's the weakest out of season 14. Robots of Death. The best story out of season 14, and my favorite Tom Baker story of all time, and one of my favorite Cosmic Series stories. I just love the Vok robots in it, especially Day 4. He reminds me of the Bison Tentacle Man, who was portrayed by the late Robin Williams. So yep, Challenge Wing Chiang. Another fantastic story. The only thing that puts it down is the racism. And yeah, but I love it. Fantastic story. Does well for a 6-parter. So yeah. Overall, season 14, in my opinion, is a really strong season. I see it as Tom Baker's best season. And I'm so glad that season 14 is now come out on Blu-ray and was the third Tom Baker season to come out on Blu-ray. So I'm glad we got it. So now we're heading into season 15. Horror Fang Rock, fantastic story. Another one of my favorite Tom Baker stories. The Royon's just so great and fun. I find it so funny how it screams. It reminds me of Davros a bit. It's such a dark story anyway, how everyone dies in the end. It does so well for a post-Philip Hinchcliffe story. Visible Enemy, a great story. I think it's really underrated. Such a great debut to K9 as a character. Again, it does. The Shrimp Virus is great as well. Love the design of it. It does so well. Again, another great post-Philip Hinchcliffe story. Image of the Fendel, one of my favorite Tom Baker stories. And again, another story that does so well it's another dark, horrific story. It does so well for a post-Philip Hinchcliffe story. The Sunmakers, it's pretty good. It does drag quite a lot. I think it should have been a 5-parter, but that's just my opinion. Underworld, it's okay. It doesn't deserve all the hate it gets, but I know it's not one of the best Tom Baker stories, but it's okay for what it is. Invasion of Time, an okay final. The Sultans, I think, at this point are really starting to decline as great villains at this point. It's okay for a final. Not one of the best Tom Baker stories. Rival Celebration, great start to season 16. Yep, really underrated story. People only watch it for part 1, but I think it's really enjoyable. The Pirate Propellant, really underrated story. I love this story. It doesn't deserve all the hate it gets. Stones of Blood, yeah, it's got some good moments in it, but I think it's a pretty bad story, but it's got some few good moments here and there in it. Androids of Terror, the best story out of season 16. Fantastic story, another one of my favorite Tom Baker stories of all time. I think this is probably like the best story out of season 16. Paracrawl, a really underrated story. I just love Crawl. I think because I have such a fascination for octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish. Armageddon Factor, a pretty good final for season 16. Season 16 is a pretty underrated season in my opinion. I don't think it deserves all the hate again. It only had one bad story. The rest is just actually pretty enjoyable. Destiny of the Daleks, a really underrated story. While I don't think it's good as Genesis of the Daleks, but it's still pretty enjoyable. City of Death, the best story out of season 17. I love how it's set in France. The soundtrack for it is just brilliant. Creature from the Pit, it's okay. Nyron Eden, another okay story, not one of the best Tom Baker story. Oh, I forgot to mention, Creature from the Pit had this really inappropriate scene where Tom Baker was kissing the green Bob's thing. It looked like it was kissing its penis. Ugh. Horns of Nymon. Shit molded into this. That is like the worst story out of the whole season. Now we head into season Tom Baker's last 8 stories. So just get at all the news story stuff out of the way. So let's begin. Sorry about that. So here we got Shudder. I love how this is finally completed. And if you get the Blu-ray, the season 17 Blu-ray box set, you'll get it as the 6-parter edition as what they originally intended. So yeah, which we now have season 17 on Blu-ray as well. But I wasn't expecting that season to be next. I was really hoping for season 13, as I just find season 17 to be Tom Baker's most weakest season in general. That's just my opinion. Now we head into Tom Baker's final season of his 7-year run. We got The Leisure Hive, which is okay. Meglos, this is where season 18 gets good. Great story, fantastic story in my opinion. Tom Baker's portrayal as both Meglos and the Fourth Doctor works so well, and it's nice to see the actress who played Barbara from the William Hartnell era, who hadn't been seen since Hartnell's 2nd season, come back. So yeah, brilliant. Full Circle, great start to the EA Space Trilogy and a great introduction to Atrik. State of K, another one of my favorite Tom Baker stories of all time. I love how the vampires in it, it's just brilliant. So yeah, another one of my favorite Tom Baker stories of all time. So yeah, the best out of the EA Space Trilogy. Always a great story. It does have its flaws, but probably like the weakest out of the EA Space Trilogy. The Keeper Truckin', fantastic story. Another one of my favorite Tom Baker stories of all time. It's a really dark horror story. It does so well for a post-70s story. And Jeffrey's Beavis Master is so brilliant in this story. So yeah, I love it. Really dark, horrific story. And then we have the last story of all time, Logopolis. Another fantastic story, really enjoyable. Such a great closure to the Tom Baker era of the show. Anthony Allen is just brilliant as the Master. Such a great due to Anthony Allen's Master. The Watcher is just really creepy. Tom Baker. But Tom Baker looks like he's really tired and worn out at that point. I guess because when you did the role as the Doctor he did the role as the Doctor for so long and doing it for so many seasons, I can see why. A lot of people say this is a great closure to his Doctor. I'll say it's meh. I just don't think anyone knew how long he was going to stay. Like, I just think he just got to the point where he just said, that's it, I can't do it any longer, I quit. Overall, I think it's a great closure to the Tom Baker era of the show, and it really, like, if Tom Baker stayed on for, like, another season, I probably say he probably would have collapsed from exhaustion, and the ratings for the show would have been way more lower. As you can tell, the ratings were starting to decline during the later half of season 17, and they just dropped during season 18. So yeah, I think it was great that he left after this story. So yeah, this was in my opinion, a great closure to his run. And I love season 18 as a whole. This was the second Tom Baker season to be released on Blu-ray, which I think season 18 is so much better than season 17. It's got such a Philip Hinchcliffe feeling to it. I can see why John Nathan Turner was trying to go back to more of the Philip Hinchcliffe feeling to the show. So yeah, overall, that is like my entire ranking on the part 4 of of the Tommy Gooders show. Next up will be the rankings on the Peter Davison era show. Later now, bye and not forever. This is Juki Dave signing off. Bye.